Check, check, 1, 2. This theory is going to make some people angry. I have scraped through every available bit of information throughout the entirety of Make Your Mark. I have watched the way she talks, who she talks to, and what she says. Next to the literal creators of this show, I am the most well-versed person in the entirety of the world when it comes to this character. Who am I talking about, you might be asking? Sunny Star Scout? Argyle Starshine? Opaline? No. I'm talking about Elderflower.
What?
The old crazy mare that appears in Chapter 5, Episode 4. And it has the community split in half. If you don't know, Elderflower is currently the fandom's biggest sore spot. We get introduced to this character as a B-plot of Sunny and Zip going to try to coax the story of the past of Equestria out of her. And in this episode, Elderflower drops some pretty big hints that she really shouldn't know about. Let's start with Elderflower herself. She is a very strangely animated character. Intentionally strangely animated character. It's almost as if she's putting up a facade, that she's not actually this old, she just pretends to look this old. Look at the way in particular she says this line.
This reminds me of the tale when the raccoon bit the snake.
Oh, that is such a good one.
She immediately resets and rests her face. Compared to how she looked literally 5 seconds ago, is she pretending to be old, or is she actually just this old? Elderflower is Moondancer's great auntie. That's 4 greats, and remember that because this will be important for later. Izzy says that Elderflower has stories passed from generation to generation. I'll withhold any arguments I have till later, but the reason why Elderflower is so divisive within the community right now is because she is living proof that G4 and G5 aren't like 1,000 or 2,000 years apart. G4 and G5 are like right next to each other in the timeline. Her being alive at all suggests that G4 and G5 were less than 100 years apart, right? Let's get into that. One of the first things that are mentioned outside the great auntie bit is while in Zephyr Heights, she sees a Pegasus wearing a sun hat. And what's very interesting, she calls this hat a vintage Carousel Boutique hat, which, if you don't know, was talking about the clothing empire that Rarity was assembling during the events of G4. She mentioned that they're hard to find, and I believe that this is not a recreation of a Carousel Boutique hat. This is a literal Carousel Boutique hat. It came from Carousel Boutique. If the timeline between G4 and G5 isn't 1,000 years apart, then this hat should be in a museum. This is a museum piece. If this hat is like 1,000 years old, it should be returning to being a silkworm. It should be hung and framed within a museum, and she's wearing it willy-nilly. That means that these hats aren't yet like a collector's piece. These hats aren't old enough to be considered like a museum piece. Okay, that was pretty controversial. Calling a hat Carousel Boutique hat, though she implies it came from a Carousel Boutique, but it might not be. It could be hand-waved away as Elderflower just mistaking the hat as one that came from Carousel Boutique. It could be of a Carousel Boutique style, rather than a direct hat from Carousel Boutique. That could be hand-waved away, okay, whatever. But we're not done yet. Sunny and Zip take Elderring down to the Zephyr Heights Grand Central Station, the same one that we saw in the movie. And we have a little bit of an eye-opening conversation with Elderflower herself. One of the very first things that she does is she takes a set of glasses that look suspiciously similar to Vinyl's glasses, and she calls them classic. But unlike the Carousel Boutique hat, she calls these ones of a classic design. That's very important. Not classic glasses, a classic design. Okay? Of course, these glasses could have just been around for a while. I mean, Vinyl didn't have to make these type of glasses. She didn't have to make the design. It could just have been a design that's been around for a while. Okay, sure. But they are classic. Then in the next scene, Elderflower is doing these strange stretches and drops a bombshell. And I'm warning you, I have literally argued with people over Discord about this next coming line. So be prepared to get controversial in here. These next few lines have literally put the fandom into pieces. Take a listen.
Once I attended a super fancy sparkly wedding, but all the ponies kept changing shapes and I almost threw out my hip.
A sparkly wedding with changing horses. She is undoubtedly, without a shadow of a doubt, talking about the season 2 finale, Changeling Invasion. And she's talking about being there. I've had to argue with people who said that this doesn't necessarily have to be the wedding from season 2. It can be another wedding. What other wedding in the entirety of the show would they be referencing? If you're the kind of person that says, oh, this could be a different wedding where they also had a changeling invasion, you're just wrong. Cope. So that's the definitive proof and evidence that the fact that Elderflower was there proves that G4 and G5 are less than 100 years apart from each other.
All the ponies kept changing shapes, and I almost threw out my hip.
What?
And I almost threw out my hip, threw out my hip, threw out my hip, threw out my hip.
I'm so done with this franchise. She almost threw out her hip. She almost threw out her hip. Ah! That throws a wrench into the 100 years apart thing. Let's talk about it. Now, with all of these evidence points, these bulletin points, it leads me to a few theories. I have 3 theories currently leading in my noggin why Elderflower is the way she is. And bear with me because these theories are ranked from least insane to the most insane. Number 1, Elderflower is simply insane. She's old. She's getting on in years. Elderflower genuinely did have these stories passed down years to year, and she's just getting them mixed up. Number 2, the events of G4 and G5 are, in fact, less than 100 years apart from each other, which that theory is going to make a lot of people mad. And 3, the final theory, Elderflower is a time traveler. Okay, bear with me. Let's start with the easiest one and the one that's gonna get the least amount of people actually mad at me. Number 1, Elderflower is just insane. Elderflower is shown time and time again to not be in the best of mental states, specifically when Izzy first introduces her. To the way she talks, to how much ADHD she has stored in her core, it's not out of the question to conclude that Elderflower is just a little cuckoo up there. Although, yeah, she probably is related to Moondancer. She's simply messing up the series of events that happen in her head. Like Izzy said, she could just be very well versed in stories in the old equestrian, and she could just recognize old vintage fashion and classic designs when she sees it. She could have heard the stories from her grandmother, pass it down to her, and accidentally mentally place herself in there, which is a real phenomenon. It's called false memories. Bing it, it's real. But I dislike this theory because it relies on you, the viewer, to hand wave away everything. Everything she says, hand wave it away. Imagine if I put out a theory video that said all of G4 was dream theory and Twilight Sparkle knocked herself out by accident during her magical exam. And all of G4 is a figment of her imagination. The same logic applies to just waving away Elderflower. Oh, her recognizing a Carousel Boutique hat? Ah, she's insane. Her being at the Changeling Invasion? Pfft, whatever, she's just crazy. Throwing out her hip? Ah, I'm sure she's just confusing it. Needless to say, I do dislike this theory, besides it being the least controversial one. Theory number 2! The events of G4 and G5 are less than 100 years apart. Take everything that Elderflower says at absolute face value, then G4 and G5 are much closer than we thought they were. I'm approaching all of this as of ponies have similar lifespans to humans. I'm sure there's like some kind of Greek mythology that says like Pegasuses can live for like 700 years or something like that, but for these theories, we're gonna assume they have a normal lifespan. I've said it before, but the Changeling Invasion comment just outright proves it. This is the only theory that makes that Changeling Invasion comment make sense. Of course, there still is the throwing out the hip comment that still ruins this. It makes sense why Vinyl's glasses were called classic and the Carousel Boutique hat not being degraded back into the earth. But one thing that does degrade this theory is when Izzy says that Elderflower is Moondancer's great auntie. That's still a little bit strange, because that's like 5 generations. If it's less than 100 years apart, that's like, what, 3 generations? How can it be 5? And maybe Izzy just either was using hyperbole or not enough hyperbole. Elderflower either isn't related to Moondancer or is either more or less distantly related than we thought she was. Oh god. Let's move on to theory number 3. This is my personal favorite because it's literally crazy. Theory number 3. Elderflower is a time traveler. Yup. The next special of Make Your Mark is Secrets of Starlight. And Starlight is known for using time travel to not go forwards, but rather backwards in time to destroy Equestria multiple times over again. I mean, if she's related to Moondancer, who's really good at magic, and I would assume going forwards in time is easier than going backwards, I could see this old lady easily being able to go forwards like 1,000 years. This sounds crazy, and I know it does. But honestly, this is one of the only things that makes sense. Think about it. It makes sense why she called Vinyl's glasses classic, because to her they are. The reason why she called that sun hat vintage, because to her it is. And in the past, if she was Moondancer's aunt, it's not that big of a stretch that when she goes forwards in time, she could just lie and say she is Moondancer's great aunt, because she was Moondancer's aunt at one point. It would make sense how she was at the Changeling Invasion and was able to say that she almost got her hit, because she would still be pretty old at that time. She can accurately describe to Sunny and Zip what happened to Twilight and Opaline, because she was there and saw the writing on the wall that said, "Get the heck out of Equestria, things are about to go down." And she did, she went forward 1,000 years. But I'm not saying that's what's happening. That theory still relies on the hat not being vintage, but rather a recreation of the Carousel Boutique hat. I'm not saying that this is what's happening or has happened. I'm saying that this is my theory, and I know it sounds crazy. This is my Sans' Ness moment. Other than just saying that G4 and G5 were 100 years apart, or hand-waving away Elderflower is mentally insane, this theory makes sense. Or, theory number 4, the writers just love screwing with us. That's probably it. There is no time traveling. The writers just love screwing with people like me who overanalyze the most simplest of things in a kid's cartoon. Yeah. That's probably it. You can subscribe, please, or not, but I will see you guys later. Hey, Gus.
Scrolling through some of these comments on my latest theory video, I wonder if you people even watch the video. Oh my god. There's so many things here that just make me go, huh. You kidding me?